Everyone, and welcome to our first meeting in our new chamber layout. Hopefully it will go smoothly today with all our new technology. So I will declare the meeting open at 10:31 on Wednesday the 16th of August. Oh, sorry, 9:31. Wishful thinking, yeah. And I would like to acknowledge the Quandamooka people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. And I would also pay respect to their elders, past, present, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians who are present and all other persons who are present here today as well. For housekeeping, I would like to remind you all that this meeting is being recorded in audio and video, and it is also being live streamed online. Councillors are reminded that parliamentary privilege does not extend to this chamber as it does for state and federal parliamentarians. You are reminded to be cognizant of this in any comments which you make during the course of this meeting. I would also like to remind councillors to use your microphone when speaking, and for any councillors or officers who are attending virtually, please use the mute button when not speaking. In the event of an evacuation, I would ask that you remain calm and follow the directions of the officers present. The emergency exit is through the gallery doors on the left, and the stairwell to Bloomfield Street is your exit. There has been a technology upgrade in council chambers with the installation of new video and audio equipment to replace old and ageing infrastructure. This includes the installation of 6 cameras to improve the live streaming of council's general and special meetings. The new technology will provide the viewer with a clearer audio and visual experience of our meeting. So, councillors, you are reminded that they're all around. Public conduct during meetings, 8.4 of the standing orders. All members of the public present at the meeting today are reminded that you must not, without prior approval of the chairperson, make any audio or video recordings or take any photographs. You must remain quiet and not disrupt the meeting in any way. You must not bring into the meeting any signs, placards or items that may cause a hazard or interfere with any person present. Be suitably dressed and turn all mobile devices to silent and leave the meeting to take any calls. As chairperson, it is my responsibility to warn a member of the public present at a meeting who is not complying with any of these requirements and may, with or without such warning, require the person to leave the meeting and not return for such period as the chairperson decides. This period may include future meetings. So with that, councillors, Mayor Karen Williams is unable to be with us today, and so I would like a mover and a seconder, please, to grant leave of absence to Mayor Karen Williams in attending the LGAQ meetings. Moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Mackenzie.
Just wondered if we would mention the reason for her not being here today, which is that she is at a policy executive meeting, I understand, for LGAQ.
Well, thank you, Councillor. We'll move on to the vote. Well, I did, but I don't have a great deal of detail, so I don't intend to expand on that. So, councillors, with that, I'll put the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. And just a reminder, councillors, to sign the attendance sheet for today's general meeting, which is in diligent boards and needs to be completed. Now I'd like to invite our member from the Redland Ministers Fellowship, Pastor Az Hamilton, who is from the Beacon Church, to come and give us a brief devotional segment. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me this morning. It's good to be here. My first time to be at a general meeting as well. So your new structure, I'm not sure what it used to be, but it's great to be here. Hey, it's an honour to be able to share with you this morning. I just want to share a bit of an encouragement as we come into the raging end of the year. August will disappear very quickly, and I'm sure that by now, if you're a bit like me as a leader of a community, you might be a little bit fatigued by making decisions. And I've been challenged this week myself as a leader to take some time out and actually have rest. And just want to share a little story about a great leader in the Bible. His name's Elijah. And in the book of 1 Kings, he actually comes to a head with some false gods. And it's an amazing story of this one man takes on 450 men, a bit of a god duel, you could say. And if you know the story, Elijah actually wins this duel by calling fire down from heaven, and these false prophets ended up getting eradicated, who were bringing a bunch of evil into the nation. And as a result, Elijah wins and has a hero moment. And I think sometimes as leaders, we have moments where we have great success and we walk away going, yeah, good job. I've got my area back on track. We're doing well. We're doing good in the community. But what's interesting about Elijah is he goes from this real high to a real low within one chapter. In chapter 19, we find him running. He's actually running away from the boss of the men that he killed. She sends a message and says, by tomorrow morning, you'll be dead. And so for the next 24 hours, he runs and then finds himself in the wilderness, it says, under a bush tree, and calls out to God and says, kill me now. I'd rather be dead. Kill me now. And I find it so interesting, this great leader who hears from God, has all this miraculous power in his life, one chapter later is saying, I just want to die. And then he goes to sleep under the tree. And the story says that an angel of the Lord wakes him up and says, hey, Elijah, eat some food and drink some drink. And so he eats this food that's there and this water, and then he goes back to sleep. And the angel wakes him up again and says, hey, Elijah, wake up, eat some more food, drink some more drink, because you've got a massive journey ahead of you, and your leadership is not over. You're not supposed to be dead. And he gets this food, and then he keeps moving on, and this angel says, hey, wait, God's going to speak to you. And it's sort of an amazing story. It says that wind comes, and he doesn't hear God in the wind, and then a fire comes, doesn't see God in the fire, and then an earthquake comes, doesn't see God in the earthquake, which he's really used to because he's a prophet and he sees all sorts of crazy stuff. And then it says a silent whisper comes and God speaks to him. And it's actually in the silence and that little whisper that allows Elijah to continue to do the job that he's called to. And he continues and goes forth, and he has an amazing story beyond that and doesn't die like he thought he would. And I just wanted to encourage us all today, just a couple of things that I take from that story. It's interesting, he went from hero to zero just because he was exhausted. And maybe you're feeling exhausted here today. Can I challenge you? We make bad decisions when we're exhausted. Sometimes we want to tap out. We've had a big year, lots of decision making. Even for myself as a leader of a community, last week I said to my wife, we need time out. We went and switched off. And it took me about 3 days to recharge my batteries before my brain could make good decisions. And we want great decision makers in this city, right? And so you need to be refreshed and recharged. So take some time with your family, take some time off. Second, if you haven't taken time off, maybe go have a good meal and have a good sleep. Maybe have a drink, get refreshed. And if it doesn't work the first time, go back to sleep, have another good meal, and get refreshed again. And then my final little encouragement today is simply maybe you just need to stop all the noise in your life. I know as leaders of the city, I know you have the best intentions for this city. You're full, you'd have your emails full, you have a lot of noise coming at you 24/7. Can I encourage you maybe this week just to stop and be silent? That same God that spoke to Elijah, I believe, can still speak today. I believe he speaks, but sometimes he wants us to shut up and listen. And so my challenge is maybe for each and every one of you, maybe this week as we run into the end of the year, before you keep running and maybe finding yourself in a place of despair, stop and take some silence and have a listen. Maybe for the first time pray and say, God, hey, what direction do you want me to go in? And it's amazing how he speaks when we give him the time. So that's my encouragement for you all this morning. Be a bit more like Elijah. Don't stop running because you're tired and exhausted, but take the time out to get refreshed. If it's okay, I'd love to pray for you all as you continue into the end part of the year. So God, I thank you for this incredible group of leaders that have the best intention for our city. God, we thank you that they're great decision makers and that you would help them make excellent decisions, that this city will be the greatest city it could possibly be. In Jesus' name, pray. Amen. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Az. Thank you, councillors. I'd just like to take a moment now, if I can, on a sombre note, and on behalf of all the council organisation and councillors to offer our condolences to the family and friends of those who perished in the devastatingly tragic house fire on Russell Island in the early hours of the 6th of August. We acknowledge the loss and pain being felt by Russell Island's community, and we offer thanks to the first responders, to the various emergency service officers, the local disaster management group, council officers and others in the community more broadly who have come together to provide support to the community in this time of need. Council will continue to offer support in every way it can during this time of grieving and recovery. Further, we acknowledge the families who have been displaced from their homes as a result of this devastating event. Council and the community continue to support through Give It for those families affected also. And I would like to hand over to a Divisional Councillor, Mark Edwards, to also say a few words on behalf of his community.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As the Divisional Councillor for Russell Island, I would like to add my personal condolences to the family in what is a truly challenging time for everyone involved. I pay my respects to those who died in the blaze, the young boys, Zachary, 11, Harry, 10, 4-year-old twins, Kaiser and Noah, and Nikki, 3, and of course their father, Wayne Godinette. The Russell Island community is resilient and proud and have rallied together to support the family involved and each other, and their loss has been felt deeply and widely. The communities of the neighbouring southern Moreton Bay Islands and from Minjerribah and all across the mainland have reached out to Russell Island in a caring embrace and are sharing their grief. Together, as a united city, we'll get through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Moving on now, councillors. Well, we might have a moment's silence, actually. So if we can, 1 minute silence. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. And moving on with our agenda now, I've not been advised of any recognitions of achievement, so we'll move on to the receipt and confirmation of the minutes at 5.1. May I have a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the general meeting held on the 19th of July 2023 be confirmed? Moved, Councillor Hughes. Seconded, Councillor Boglari. Are there any points of note? No? With that, I'll put the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Councillors, at this point, I would like to take a moment to remind you of the prescribed conflict of interest and declarable conflict of interest requirements. Councillors, you are reminded your responsibilities in relation to the councillor's prescribed conflict of interest and declarable conflict of interest in a meeting, and details of these responsibilities are also outlined on your agenda. Please be reminded that all interests need to be declared at a statutory meeting of council. This means any prescribed or declarable conflict of interest relating to an item being discussed at a non-statutory meeting needs to be declared at a general or special meeting preceding the non-statutory meeting or workshop. A potential list of items to be discussed at all non-statutory meetings are made available for each workshop agenda before the preceding general meeting so that this can be achieved. These declarations can also be made at any time throughout the meeting, and I have not been advised of anyone wanting to declare a conflict. With that, I'll hand over to our acting CEO, Amanda Parfumi, to go through the matters outstanding.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have got a number of motions. So 7.1, we've got a notice of motion for an investigation into the location for a wildlife hospital. We're going to bring that one back to a future meeting of council. 7.2, we also have a subordinate local law, number 4. Similarly, we're going to be bringing that back to a future meeting that will address dot point 3 above. 7.3, similarly will be brought back to a future meeting of council. That's to look at the local government infrastructure designation consultation strategy for the Birkdale Community Precinct. 7.4, secondary dwellings, we do have listed as a matter on this agenda at item 15.4. 7.5, we've got the potential options to support the delivery of affordable housing on the Redlands coast. Again, similarly, that will come back to a future meeting of council. And finally, 7.6, a notice of motion for a report on council's programs which are related to the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. That will also come back to a future meeting of council. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Participation, so we will move on to petitions and presentations. To the best of my knowledge, we do not have any petitions to be presented, but we do have a presentation from Councillor Tracy Hughes. So, Councillor Hughes, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm giving a presentation this morning on the National General Assembly of Council at the Australian Local Government Association's 2023 conference. It's called the Assembly. It was held. These conferences are held annually each June in Canberra, and this year hosted 1,100 delegates. The room was absolutely full, and the theme this year was Our Communities and Our Future. The discussion topics that are relevant to our diverse community. Opened by His Excellency General, the Honourable David Hurley, who shared his admiration for local government when, as he said, meets their community and looks them in the eye. And I thought that was really well said, and it's so true. This morning I was moving around a bit earlier and a lady stopped and literally looked me in the eye. Do you have time for a coffee? Oh, sorry, not this morning, but can we catch up tomorrow? So literally looked me in the eye and thought she would have that moment, and it's true. The Honourable Catherine King MP, Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government, and ALGA President Linda Scott were the first speakers on the day, and were followed by a panel of experts sharing opinion on building a stronger workforce. And again, a really relevant topic. We've talked about it many times in this chamber regarding our particular workforce just here within council, but also with regard to contractors and that pipeline of work trying to get out with workforce. Really great topic. The Honourable Peter Dutton MP, Leader of the Opposition, addressed the Assembly, and guest speaker, His Excellency, Ambassador of Ukraine, and I know I won't say his name correctly, so please excuse me, Vasyl Myroshensky. Not quite close enough, I'm sure. Well, he was very warmly received, and he spoke with deep emotion and shared the strength of his country and extended his thanks to the level of Australian support. Keynote speaker, who I absolutely had no idea who he was indeed someone that most of the room knew, aka ABC's Giggle and Hoot, Jimmy Reeves. And I know Councillor Golly and I were sitting there and going like, who? For a keynote speaker in a national conference. I understand he was actually the giggle part of the Giggle and Hoot pairing on an ABC children's program, and we were all sort of starting to shake our heads, etc. What's going on? And he is a comedian and social media guru. he actually had us in fits of laughter start a conference. You wouldn't have put him at the start, but he was there and he did fantastically because he talked about the importance of pivot and community. And it was a really great opening, so well done to him. Panel discussions regarding the future of local government was led by Dr. Jonathan Carr West. He was CEO of Local Government Information Unit from the UK. Really very intelligent man and very topical. Great conversation, and we had Leading Communities Through Change by Jennifer Mickelmore, Chief Executive of Studio THI, and she particularly captured our Customer and Community Services Manager, Louise Rassan's attention. The presentation was in-depth and very thought-provoking. The important topics of cyclones, fires and floods was led by Brendan Moon, AM, Coordinator General, National Emergency Management Agency, where they get these titles from, followed by discussion regarding Australia's affordable housing crisis. Really topical conversations that needed to be had at a national level. I think we've all talked about it before, the importance of going to these conferences and not just looking in our back door, but looking over our back fence as well. Cybersecurity, always topical and always on an agenda, and was led by Clive Reeves, Deputy Chief Information Security Officer from Telstra, and Stephanie Crowe, First Assistant Director General Cyber Security Resilience, Australian Cyber Security Centre. Stephanie is the lady to go to when all else fails. Give her a call. The conference highlight for me is always the debate of motions with 1,100 delegates. The conference centre was alive with passion and emotion. We all had our buttons ready to go, yay or nay. The advocacy role of ALGA is vital. Combined as a local government, we gain strength when reaching out to higher levels of government with regard to funding priorities and urgency in delivery of on-the-ground projects. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hughes. I've not been advised, councillors, of any motion to alter the order of business, and we have no reports from the Office of the CEO. So we're moving on to items 13. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for 13.1, the July 2023 monthly financial report? Moved Councillor Edwards, seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Edwards?
Just quickly, this is the first monthly report for the financial year. It's a requirement of all councils in Queensland to do monthly budgets. And my understanding is that some of these starting point figures can be changed subject to the audit by the Queensland Audit Office, and that's usually expected around the end of September. That's correct. Steve is nodding. So, so there could be some changes, but it's only the first month of a exciting financial year ahead of us.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers against? No? Well, with that, I'll put the... okay. Councillor Hughes, question?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Through you, if I could, to our CFO, Deborah Corbett-Hall. Thank you. On page 24 of the report, we've got all page 2 of 167. There's a sentence here that talks about the council controlled revenue, population growth and asset renewal funding ratios. They're reported for contextual purposes only. And I really would like to seek some clarity on that. We understand all the ratios have changed. This is the first month we're seeing the ratios that have come into play. And I'd just like a little bit more clarity on that. Thank you.
CFO, are you able to speak to that? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you as our Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hughes, for the opportunity to talk to this topic. Yes, as you correctly pointed out, the Department of State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning released their final version of a guideline, so a financial management sustainability guideline with 9 new key performance indicators, KPIs or measures of sustainability. Of those, the department has said that there are 3 that really just provide the context or some supporting information to the other targets, to the other KPIs that have targets. So there's 3 there. We've chosen to put one of them into our report because we think it will be of interest to our council and community on a monthly basis, but the other two very much are annual targets. Population growth won't change significantly month to month, so we don't feel that's of specific value add for the community on a monthly basis, and the assets renewal funding ratio is something new that we'll be working towards on an annual basis. But the others we've put in with the targets that have been set by the department. So on the website there is a document where people can see what the target is, and we've also explained each of the 10 KPIs that we have in this report on the back of the report, so people can see how they're calculated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And a question, Councillor Berridge.
Thank you, through the chair to our CFO. On page 35, Deborah, the borrowing and borrowing costs, I just had a little bit of trouble understanding and reading that one. There has been a balance increase, we know that, through to borrowing. So am I reading this correctly, that our borrowing has gone up from 37 million to 49.5 million in the past 12 months? Am I reading that correct, or because I found this chart a little bit hard to follow? Thank you.
Thank you, CFO. Bearing in mind this is a monthly report, but yes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you as Chair. Thank you, Councillor Berridge, and apologies if it isn't clear. I'll take that feedback and we'll look at that moving forward. The way I've structured the debt, I spent a lot of time with the Queensland Treasury Corporation back in 2016, and what we do is we draw down the debt at the end of the year in June, and because of Council's cash balances, we're actually borrowing for intergenerational equity as opposed to the need for the cash. So we then service that debt in a debt service payment every July. So the graph shows that throughout the year the debt increases. We then borrow in June, so we draw down new debt in June, and we service that payment in July, which is why you'll see on the graph it then comes back down, and that's the payment. So the figures were pretty close. As at the 31st of July, total borrowings were $44.55 million because we drew down in the order of $10 million in June, at the end of June, but then we serviced the debt, and we've put the debt service payment in that report. It's 5.33, made up of a principal repayment and an interest repayment. So it is a little bit complex, but the reason I've structured it like that is that it saves on interest. Most local governments pay quarterly in arrears. I'm generalising. We pay annually in advance, so it saves the community millions of dollars in interest expense. A little bit complicated, but it's worth the challenge to save the money, the community money.
Thank you, CFO. Any further questions, councillors? No? With that, I'll put the vote. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously with Mayor Karen Williams absent today. Councillors, can I have a mover and a seconder now for 13.2, the carryover budget review 23 to 24? Move Councillor Mitchell, seconded Councillor Boglari. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Mitchell?
Yes, briefly, thank you, Chair. The purpose of today is to adopt the revised budget for 2023-2024. And you'll see in the recommendation there pretty important documents: statement of comprehensive income, statement of financial position, cash flows, and of course the operating and capital funding statement. And probably just noting, while carryover budgets are nothing new, what is new, as noted in point 3, is there's increasing challenges of keeping neat and tidy and straight within the squares all the time budgets. So council is being very responsive and being very nimble in trying to deliver for our community in challenging times, and some of them are mentioned, local and worldwide issues. And there's a funding window, is how I'm looking at now, of $136 million in the capital budget that allows officers and councillors to bring projects in, out, forward and back, but still reflecting the community purpose and the community needs. So quite complex, but would invite the community to have a look at the financial segment of the report, and of course send any questions in they wish. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Any speakers against? Question, Councillor Boglari?
Due to the nature that we've actually changed process slightly this year. Like, we're not usually with our carry forwards, we carry over the monetary amount and add it on, whereas this year we're keeping it capped at 136 million. Can we ask the CFO, please, to explain this process just for clarity?
Yes, CFO, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Boglow, for the opportunity to talk to this. And you're right, the Executive Leadership Team has heard you at the special budget meeting and other statutory meetings where you talk about raising revenue and the raising expectation in the community, and then following through on the delivery with the challenges that we've had. All of us in the room know that since 2020, it's been very challenging with the COVID overlay and additionally other challenges in terms of supply chain issues. So I've written some extra wording in this report for the community and yourselves, both in the risk management section and also the financial implications section. And in essence, we as an executive team feel because you adopted a capital works budget of 136 million on the 26th of June, that's a large sum of money, and that's a significant amount that we want to try and deliver those works this year with the same challenges that hang over us and the carry forwards that have been approved by you next year. So whilst the numbers don't change materially in the financials, what we're telling the organisation is acknowledge that we've got risk, mitigate against that risk, and let's monitor it on a monthly basis, which we used to do in previous reporting. But then we're going to come back to you at the end of the year, possibly in November or December, and say, this is what's happened since the adopted budget. These are the challenges we've mitigated in May, what we can do. We've for example, I've put in the report, we've created a new position for a Chief Procurement Officer. We've got a new procurement manual. We're working resourcing more in the major projects there, in the advocacy area. We're certainly funding up in that external funding, but we know that the grants are not as prevalent as they were back in 2020, 2021. So we're saying, give us that funding envelope, and thank you, Councillor Mitchell, that funding window of 136 million will deliver last year, because that hasn't stopped at 30 June. We keep delivering those capital works that we're carrying forward. We're also delivering what you gave us from the 1st of July. We'll track it monthly, and then we'll come back to you if we need to adjust that funding envelope or funding window. Thank you.
Thank you, CFO.
Thanks,
Does that
Beth.
answer your question?
Sorry. So it's 47 million, is it, that we're carrying forward? You mentioned reports in November, because I have concerns about the size of our capital works. I acknowledge or note that there are some benefits to do it that way, but I still have concerns. You mentioned reports in November. That's the that's the annual report and the budget review at that time, where we'll note what is happening with the various prioritisation of projects and everything. Is that correct?
Thank you, CFO.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you. Thank you, Councillor Boglow, for the opportunity to further explain and possibly clarify. So yes, in November I was referring to a budget review. So traditionally in the last few years we've had a budget review in November. We call that our first budget review, and that's where we can in the main change the amounts. You're right with the amount that we underspent last year following your decision on the 16th of February for the final budget review in the financial year 22-23. We had a final budget in the capex space of 124 million. You'll see the annual report. That should be out before November. So as Councillor Edwards said, we're hoping to get that out in, we'll get certification in September, hopefully to be tabling the report September, October time, depending on how we fare with the QAO, the Queensland Audit Office. But you'll see both the actuals and then the budget. We had about $50 million underspent at 30 June, and of that, 47 million is being carried over. The surplus, as we've talked about before, we'll see when the annual report's finalised. And what we're really saying is, because the asset service management plans and the decisions that you're making under the corporate plan, the quantum now is in a different league to what it was 10 years ago and 15 years ago. 136 is enough. Yes, we're going to continue the works that are in the quantum of $47 million, but we don't want to extend the capital program to the 185 million mark, because there are constant challenges. As you hear every night when you go home, supply chain issues, availability of contractors, we go to tender. If there's no responses, it's very hard to do the work if there's no responses to a tender, permits, licenses, fees. So we're continuing. We're very committed to delivering. I've put that in the report, and then we can talk to you later in this financial year, but also the calendar year before the Christmas break to see if we need to change the budget when we have more information to hand.
Thank you, CFO. Yes, one quick one if we could.
Thank you. And I understand the constraints are just going to keep coming at us at the moment, unfortunately. Just for accountability, the 3 million gap, those projects will be given to us in a report later in the year.
So as I've spoken before, sorry, through you, Deputy Mayor's Chair, thank you very much. As I've mentioned before, so we need to wait for the Queensland Audit Office to finalise the accounts because, as Councillor Edwards said, they might move, numbers might move. We're a large, diverse organisation. Once those accounts are finished, once we know what the actual delivery was at 30 June, we can then compare it to budget, and as an executive team, we'll be more than happy to step through that detail. Accountability, no problem. We can see that in the ledgers. Transparency, we report every month how we're travelling. And I think just to close out, as I've talked to before, we're trying to signal to both suppliers, both to tenderers and people that we want to work with that we have a large capital program, so we have sufficient work to make it worthwhile for tendering, and we want to do business with Redland City Council. I think I've mentioned before in the public record, we held an inaugural industry briefing on the 31st of May to try and get on the front foot for the 1st of July. So as an executive team, we're doing everything within our powers to get the programs delivered and worked. Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you, CFO. A question, Councillor Bishop?
No speaking against.
Oh, I'm sorry, we've passed that stage. I called for speakers against.
I had my hand up.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were asking a question. All right, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to commence just by acknowledging that our executive leadership team are doing everything that we ask. They really are. We have, as a council, adopted a very ambitious budget. This is the second year of adopting budgets to resource the corporate plan, which has some really huge aspirational projects proposed in it. And some of those are adding up, and this year the budget was allocated to deliver some of those. We do know it's a very constrained market. We do know it's a hot market. We know it's going to continue to remain a hot market. I believe that we should look at the order of magnitude of the $47 million which is proposed as the carryover, and while we're looking at putting that into consolidated revenue, which I understand is the proposal, every year that I've been a councillor, we've spent between $60 to $80 million in our CapEx. That's the business as usual. It's the capacity for this organisation. We're not increasing the number of staff. We are increasing the expectation that officers will do more. I think we need to take a moment to see the rate of carryovers that have increased every year and see that the size and scale of the order of magnitude of that number is increasing. And I think we need to cut our cloth and review the scope of some of the projects that we as council have undertaken to propose. I think the market is not going to be in our favour, and I think all the predictions are that we are going to see a constrained environment. It's going to be very challenging, and I think it's important for us to take stock, to look at what we're promising. $124 million was the revised budget for last year, carryover of $47 million. It's likely that we will deliver $80 million or something to that order again this year. We'll probably have a $50 million carryover by the end of this year, in 11 months' time. That's a total of $100 million that we've charged for, and what I hope to see as we come back for that audited review is a line of the projects that we had intended to do, where we've delivered, where we've not, where we've made savings, and where we're choosing to step away. And I think what council needs to consider is how we can constrain some of the expectations and be less ambitious and more practical for the sake of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. CFO would like to respond to that, if you would please, CFO, in regard to charging, etc.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to Councillor Bishop, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to this. Just to clarify the fact, when we compile the budget, we aren't raising rates and charges explicitly for capital works. And I think just so that the community is aware, that's why we hold in excess of $100 million in reserves for infrastructure charges, and why we also borrow. So we've increased our borrowing program. So just to reassure that financially, when we run an operating deficit, we're not raising enough rates, charges and levies to cover operational expenses, never mind capital expenses. So I think it's just to be mindful that we don't cause alarm. I think the balance sheet's very strong. We've got a very high reputation, strong reputation for fiscal management, and I just wanted to put that on the record. But thank you, Councillor Bishop, for your observations.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. So you're happy to withdraw that comment on?
If there's anything that's as I said at the beginning, I have no concerns with our ELT. I think their approach is absolutely extraordinary, and I have every confidence that they will try to do what we expect. My question is to councillors: will we curtail our expectations?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, what would?
I was just seeking clarity on a point that the CFO made, if I may, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Boglari. Fine.
Just talking about the budget and the operational funds, if we put something into capital works that needs designing or that type of part of the project, doesn't that get raised in operational, and doesn't depreciation on new things actually get raised in operational? So I think maybe what Councillor Bishop was saying is not totally incorrect by saying that we do raise some funds in operational to cover things which are in the capital works. That's my understanding.
Thank you, CFO, if you can clarify.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you as Chair, thank you, Councillor Boglari, for the opportunity to clarify. The point I was making is when we have a budget review, we're not asking the community for any further money. What you choose to raise in rates, levies, charges, and other council-controlled revenue at each budget adoption day, in the main covers the operating costs. You are right, Councillor Boglari, that depreciation is a result of new assets, but they're new assets that have been previously created. So we don't increase depreciation in the year that we're creating the asset. The asset has to be created and then it depreciates. With respect to design monies, my answer is always it depends. So depending on the accounting rules, it depends whether it is capitalised or operational expense. In the main, it can be capital expense. So I think it's just mindful that the community's aware there's over $100 million in infrastructure charges. We've talked about debt in the previous agenda item. There's in the order of $45 million worth of debt. So we, as an executive team, are very mindful of balancing the generational burden of raising rates and charges with the current service levels that you as a council determine. Thank you.
Thank you, CFO. And Councillor Hughes, is it a question, a comment, a question? Okay, question.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through yourself to our CFO. On the officer's recommendation that's on the screen now, point 2 says to meet the requirements of the local government regulation, adopt the city water and city waste operating and capital funding statements that are attached to page 11 and page 12 respectively. At our budget meeting, we did adopt these charges and the requirements. So I'm just asking, I can see in point 1 we've got to adopt the revised budget, but in point 2 it says to meet the requirements, which I felt we'd already met. So I'm asking about point 2. Thank you.
So your question is,
why is it necessary? I feel we've already
have point 2
these requirements at our budget meeting, and it's here again at point 2. Thank you.
Thank you, CFO. If you could, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you as Chair, thank you, Councillor Hughes, for the opportunity to clarify. Point 1 of Officer's recommendation is for the whole of Council, if you choose to adopt this budget review, it will change the financial statements listed A to D at Council level. Our 2 commercial businesses under legislation are City Water and City Waste, and the requirements of legislation, because they are commercial businesses, is that we have to update those. So you're 100% correct. On the 26th of June, you chose to adopt budgeted financial statements for City Water and City Waste. SOCIs in the main, so statements of comprehensive income or operating capital funding statements, not all the other statements. But now that if you choose to have a capital carryover review, there's a think off the top of my head, $30,000 change in one of the commercial businesses. There's no change in the other. So we're just aligning with legislation to say, if you choose to change the budget at entity level, these 2 commercial businesses form part of that entity and they will change. So it's updating our records. General housekeeping, in other words. Thank you.
Thank you, CFO.
Thank you. Now, I've with all of that, lost track. Thank you. Councillor Mitchell, would you like to conclude your motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, Madam Chair. Yeah, look, I think that's a really terrific debate. So in summing up, I think our community, that's one of the points of transparency and openness and comfort that I think our community should have in adopting such important matters such as the carry out the budget. We take our fiscal hygiene very seriously here in the Redlands, and we also take delivering for the community, both operationally and in capital works, very seriously indeed. So just in summing up, a number of comments from around the room. I think the public documentation that is freely available is comprehensive, much more than many other councils do. We go far and beyond our statutory obligations. It's been noted the multiple touch points that ELT and councillors have to review all budget matters across the year. It's been noted, and especially again, I want to note Councillor Bishop's comment on how skilled, extraordinary indeed, our financial team are, doing everything that the majority of council has asked. So that's also important for the community to note. We heard about an ambitious a budget through here. Well, ambition's not a dirty word. Just ask the Matildas. I think that's pretty special. And as long as ambition is delivered in the cold light of day, with such reviews as we've highlighted today by councillors and ELT at multiple points, that's fantastic. And our corporate vision is embracing opportunity, I must say, one of the three visions. So. Great debate. I think the community can be very comforted that there is this level of scrutiny by all of us as councillors in the LT, and that will help build the understanding and trust as we move forward in very difficult times, but very exciting times. And I put the officer's recommendation to the room.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. With that, I put the vote. Councillors, those in favour? Okay, we have a division. So those in favour are Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Golay, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Berridge, Councillor Talty. Those against are Councillor Boglari, Councillor Hewlett and Councillor Bishop, with Councillor Karen Williams absent today. Thank you. With that, it's passed. Thank you, councillors. With that, we move on to 13.3, the Operational Quarterly Plan and Performance Report. Can I have a mover and a second for 13.3? Moved Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Councillor Edwards. Councillor Mackenzie, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, just to note that this is the Q4 operational plan and that we're required to have an operational plan that sets out how we're going to implement our corporate plan, which is our future Redlands, a corporate plan to 2026 and beyond, noting that we don't anticipate to have all those projects done by 2026, and it is a bold corporate plan, one that our community probably is calling for in anecdotal evidence that they expect more from this council. So in 2022-23, council has completed 51 of 67 of the significant activities, noting there is just the ongoing one of concern. The catalyst projects finalised have been the Manjeraba Panorama Coastal Walk and the Marine Public Transport Facility Program. Council will progress the remaining 16 of 67 significant activities from the operational plan, and the majority of these activities are on track for completion in 23-24. And just on behalf of probably all councillors, we'd just like to say thank you to all our council officers, ELT, and down to the staff on the ground that work very hard to implement this operational plan for us.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Do I have a speaker against? No. A question, Councillor Boglari?
Oh, thank you. Through you to, GM Infrastructure and Operations, Nicole Davies, please. On page 53 of 74, there is a project to do with our Southern Moreton Bay Islands, which is something that the Divisional Councillor and I have been discussing for many years, and we'd just like to know more about the project, please. Thank you.
Dr. Davis, if you could.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Thank you, Councillor Boglari. That is one of the projects that is definitely part of the Catalyst project. It's been delivered in a number of stages. The first stage is actually reviewing all of the work that we've done, whether it's from planning, whether it's...
Sorry, could you just say what the project is?
Oh, sorry.
I didn't. Sorry, I meant to.
Sorry. It's the Simbi Island Infrastructure Project, the roadmap for looking at what we do in support of our Simbi Islands. As you know, there's already been a significant investment in infrastructure there with the ferry terminals, but this is to look at it a bit more holistically. There's been a number of individual reports done across council, and the first stage was actually to review those and see and undertake a gap analysis. The second part of it is to actually look at bringing that back to council for a review and a workshop. And it will involve establishing some governance bodies, undertaking some community engagement going forward, and that's planned to be happen sometime next year, next calendar year, just basically due to workloads currently. So there will definitely be some community consultation and visioning that will come out of this project going forward.
Thank you, Dr. Davis.
I just wanted to say thank you for that, because it is a concern that is raised regularly, and I just wanted it publicly, the update said, so that the Simbi residents were aware. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is it a question you have, Councillor Golay? Okay, a question from Councillor Golay.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you to Dr. Davies. Will that incur further budget requirements, or is there already a budget set in place for those works you just described?
There will be some, sorry, through you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Davis.
There is current budget for doing stage 2 and finalising that, and then there will be some recommendations going forward.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor? No? With that, I put the vote. Those in favour? Oh, apologies. Councillor, did you want to wrap up? But with that, I put the vote. Those in favour? That is unanimous, with Councillor Karen Williams absent today. Moving on to 13.4, making and amending a subordinate local law. Councillors, you have been provided some altered motions. So just for clarity, before I ask for a mover and a seconder, this is the same motion but split into 2 votes, and as the 2 motions have different content, and in our standing orders we speak to the content of the motion on the floor. The first motion relates to the parking changes at Dunwich Cemetery. So I'll first ask for a mover for motion 1, Councillor Mitchell, seconded Councillor Boglari. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Mitchell?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, I think you're now quite well aware that the proposal in front of us relates to some parking regulation within the Dunwich Cemetery precinct itself, which of course sits comfortably within the broader Dunwich precinct, which is also being reviewed. And while that's not in front of us today, the two are intrinsically linked within the community. But this is around the cemetery piece. And it is a very important part of the puzzle in improving community outcomes in Dunwich as it relates to parking regulation. Dunwich, of course, goes right the way from Junner Street, where you may come in on the ferry, right the way to 1 mile and all the way up to Rainbow Crescent. So this is actually one of the, well, this piece is only the cemetery. The broader piece is several square kilometres of opportunity. The report talks to the 22 car parks within the 1 mile turnaround that were removed recently for safety reasons for the bus. But I think in some ways it overstates the importance of that. While it was certainly very politically challenging in the area that another 22 car parks were being pressurised, it's only about 5 or 10% of the cars parked in that surrounding area. So it's a very big problem. The knock-on effect did impact into the cemetery, which is the matter in front of us today, with some people either through ignorance or just through bad manners taking the opportunity to park for longer than intended within the cemetery grounds. And that, of course, is not the intent in any way. We want people who are mourning, paying their respects to be able to come and go. That's the purpose, and that is exactly what's in front of us today. There's an awful lot of community input that has come in as a result of this, not all of it directly related, but that reflects the broader frustrations within the community of parking around Dunwich, and that is something that we are also as a council working on currently. But one of the matters that was in there, and I spoke with Councillor Bishop yesterday about this, we had some key input from some of the some of the Indigenous elders, but not only the Indigenous population of Dunwich, who thought the proposal was for 2 hours in the area, and the input suggested that wasn't nearly long enough for that cultural piece and just the practical visitation rights. Council's listened, and my understanding is that's being pushed out to, say, 4 hours today. So that's a very practical outcome of the community engagement. So I'm seeing nods over there. I think that's indeed the case. In the report, you'll see an awful lot of other comments that are part of the reaction. I see price gouging, which is more related to the penalties, the lack of public transport and adequate parking supply. Well, there are very, very large infrastructure efforts and responsibilities that are not only councils in that area with the state government, such as public transport and the Goompy Master Plan, which aren't the matter in front of us today, but everything is linked. So this is one important piece of the puzzle, with council getting on with what it can do in that area, because we control very little, but we do control parking regulation. And this one piece of the puzzle is important to help those community outcomes in this location, but you will see very soon when the others come back to us how it fits with the broader area. So very important today. It's quite confusing, but for those that don't know the area, but this is a key piece of the puzzle, and I look forward to your support today.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Do I have any speakers against? You're a speaker against? Yes, Councillor Bishop.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I really want to acknowledge the work that is being done and has been done by councillors and by Councillor Mitchell over a period of time to address what is an ongoing matter of concern for people on the island and for people on the mainland who choose to leave a car on the island. And I think that is one of the major concerns in this instance, because they are taking up quite a lot of car park spaces on the other side at Dunwich, and maybe leaving a car there for whenever they need to get over to the island, and that's holding spaces not available for local residents. Dunwich is a very sensitive community, and the feedback to officers and to us all through the consultation was important. There were 2 phases to that. One was just an informed phase of consultation about the increased proposed penalty rates, which is effectively a doubling in the charge from 1 unit.
We're not discussing the penalty units, okay. Just the parking timing and arrangements now.
The second part was to consult with and listen to the views of the community. I think what was very clearly made evident was that it is a fragile community. There are equity issues, and financial increase in penalty, while that is council's single...
Councillor, that's in the next motion.
Yes, the consequences of a change is a cultural change to the overall area. And while I understand the need for people to not be parking in a sensitive place like the cemetery, the overall flow-on effect with a non-availability of broader parking or for resident permit parking is putting pressure on the community. And I hope that there will be other ways in future that solutions can be found in partnership with Stratty Camping, for example, and space that they have available, possibly the former school site, and I think there will be solutions made available. At this stage, I'm not convinced that we have that balance right, and I've just got some concerns about that. There's a number of things that came up during the consultation phase that I think are important, and I also note the conversation regarding the process of morning. I think the extension from 2 hours to 4 hours is a nice concession. There are certain times and certain days when cultural practice over there might necessitate a more sensitive response in that area, but that I'm sure our officers will be able to manage going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. Are there any speakers for? You're a speaker for?
I was just wondering if there's an officer with, just to clarify some of the points that Councillor Bishop made.
Well, we'll just continue the debate first. I don't think there was any specific questions there that could be clarified. Do we have a speaker for? Questions? Thank you, Councillor Golley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I would like to ask for some clarity. My understanding of the first part of this motion was to look at the parking at the cemetery site and extending hours to accommodate for heritage and cultural significance for people to use the cemetery parking for cemetery services. It wasn't to broaden it and go, well, we've got issues elsewhere and we need to broaden it. I'm trying to understand what Councillor Bishop was driving at, and I'd like.
I would encourage you to take your information from the report, Councillor.
Because it's now being on the public record. It's almost been diluted when realistically I'd just like the officers to clarify what the first part of this report is, which is, are we seeking to extend parking services for the cemetery, specifically for the cemetery, in order to mitigate the general public using it as their preferred parking space outside of cemetery services? Thank you.
I believe the answer is yes, but I can ask an officer to give a quick précis of the parts of the report that are captured in motion 1, if I can.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I may. We needed to consult on the local law, which is specifically around the cemetery parking and restrictions around that cemetery parking to allow people to go there and mourn. We also knew that there were issues around dunnage, more generally on parking. So in order to bring the communication and the consultation with the community together, we consulted on the specific cemetery one, which is the report that's on before you right now, at the same time as a broader one. There is nothing in this report about a broader dunnage regulated parking at all that we have brought to you. This is specifically around a local law to enforce parking around the cemetery to allow people to grieve.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Any further questions? No, with that, I put the motion. Those in favour? Oh, so apologies. Councillor Mitchell, would you like to sum up?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Chair, and appreciate your keenness to move the meeting along. I'm a big fan of that usually. Thank you, and thank you for the clarification, officers. And I guess I did start the context of the surrounding area, so my bad. But I do invite councillors to please speak with me or officers after this to get back, because it's really, really important. We've noted that there are many issues in the surrounding area that are nothing to do with council directly, but they are certainly to do with our community, and both the Quandamooka or the Barraby Aboriginal Corporation, state government need to be there. I know Councillor Bishop's comments around sorry business and other matters there, and would just take that on notice that we may need to do some more work with the elders or the Indigenous community there on those days, so that we're not finding people on these incredibly sensitive days. Not the scope of today's report. One thing I will take Councillor Bishop to task on, it's not a fragile community on Stradbroke Island. They're tough as nails. They have had certainly plenty of challenges, and I appreciate the intent with which that was said. They do reserve a lot of respect and a lot of support. They've had fires, they've had closing of sand mining and various other things. So for that, they might be fragile, but no, they're tough as nails. So with that, put the motion. Thank you.
With that, I will put the vote. Those in favour? That's a division. So those in favour are Councillor Boglari, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Golle, Councillor Hewlett, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Talty. Those against are Councillor Berridge and Councillor Bishop, with Mayor Karen Williams absent today. Thank you, councillors. Now, moving on the same motion at 13.4, we move on to motion 2, which relates to the proposal to increase penalty units. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved Councillor Mitchell, seconded Councillor Hughes. Councillor Mitchell, would you like to speak to that proposal?
Yes, I will, and just bear with me while I catch up, sorry, as this was separated. So we have motion 2. Yep. Councillor, yep. So this, yes, regarding the penalty units. Yeah, no one likes to get a fine. No one likes to get a fine. And so if we just put that to one side, so when you get a fine, the answer is, well, do you deserve it? And what's the purpose of that fine? So that's really what should be in front of us today. But I think we can all agree there would be no division. No one likes getting fines. The point of a fine, though, is to assist with education, and that paying is sometimes an important part of education. I think we could all agree that education is not only about fines, and as part of any regulation across our city, any compliance work, that all of us want to be a caring and kind council, where we go out and we're not heavy-handed with any compliance, but we try and educate, we try and give people an opportunity. But there are times when fines must be applied, and later in the items today we have our stronger dog laws, and certainly on things like that we are all in unity sometimes. So why are sometimes these fines important? What's the purpose of them? So I've just really quickly written down a few. So while some of the infringements that you see in here might seem minor to you, you go, well, what are the consequences? And sometimes the consequences are relatively small, and sometimes they're really quite large. But that's the purpose of fines at a certain level. So we get you people who just casually bump up over a curb. All right, any problem with that? Well, yes, it is. It breaks those curbs over time, and that costs the community a lot of money when this sort of stuff breaks down. So you bump over a curb, you get seen, you deserve a fine because you're abusing community infrastructure. Might be bump into, crush a pipe by parking somewhere you shouldn't be. That's why we have sort of fines, to protect those sort of infrastructures. Sometimes around damage, for example, it might be a park where there are things that may be culturally very sensitive. It could be European culture, that could be Indigenous culture. Sometimes a fine goes alongside the education, and the fine needs to be of a certain level so people take notice. Sometimes people parking in the wrong spots or making infringements may damage other environmental factors. Sometimes they just frustrate people. You just pull up in a zone you shouldn't outside a school, frustrate everyone behind you. You might park in a commercial loading zone just for a couple of minutes while someone gets in or out. But that upsets the people and impacts the economy. You might be blocking deliveries. And maybe the most serious of all, those small minor infringements sometimes that people go, I didn't serve that, surely there should be some discretion, or that fine's fairly large. If you block a line of sight in a built-up area or somewhere, and a car or someone has moved around you in frustration, maybe on the way to school or on the way to work, and hits that person, that's why we have fines. To make a point that sometimes the consequences of even seemingly minor traffic or parking infringements have major consequences. So these sort of fines should reflect that. And while no one likes getting a fine, really are our fines, are they a slap on the wrist, or are they something that people will take note of and therefore change their behaviour, which is really what we're trying to achieve. So I support this motion today and the penalty unit increases. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a speaker against, please? Councillor Edwards was the first hand up.
Thank you. I don't think the issue is about fines. We all know fines have a purpose. In the report it says one effective way to reduce safety-related parking or stopping offences is to increase penalties for these violations. Well, where I am, looking at the Southern Moreton Bay Islands, most of the people are on a fixed income. They're flat out just living week to week. So when they receive a fine, and I've received phone calls, and rightly, the councils can't interfere with this operational matter. We've got no control over it. But I can't tell you how many times I've had people in tears, sometimes saying, how am I going to get food next week to pay this fine? So it's all relative. If you had to increase the fine and we were, say, I don't know, in a city suburb in Sydney or something, that cost is not really impacting on them because they're affluent. But for me, looking at my division where I am, and actually it's not just in the Southern Moreton Bay Islands, we've got poverty all around this city. And I think the level of fine at the moment is sufficient. It is enough to, certainly in my area, for people that receive fine, they don't want to do it again because flat out paying the existing one. So I agree we do have fines, but I'm not going to support the increase of it.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Do I have a speaker for the motion? I will take questions. I might ask, as we're talking penalty units and that's not very clear for the community, is there an officer present who could just give us simple, this would change a parking fine from what dollars to what dollars, please? Okay, whilst the officer's coming, are there any other questions other than that one that you would like to ask? Yes, Councillor Berridge.
I too have a question.
Ask your question.
Yes, I too have questions I'd like to ask.
Yeah, please ask your question.
Oh, you want me to do it now? Oh, sorry, I thought we were waiting for officers. Oh, they're here
now, but they can hear your question.
I thought Tracy was next, but it's okay. I'm happy to go. I'm going to take a lead off what Councillor Edwards said, and he said one effective way to reduce the safety-related parking was to increase the penalties.
I think that's what the report said, Councillor.
Yes, that's correct. That's what he read it from the report, and I've repeated it. So it kicked off saying one effective way. But I couldn't find any other options in there for a second or third way, because I'm finding, like Councillor Edwards, that this is a very big stick approach, rather militant. And wouldn't the idea be to strengthen and have a peaceful approach and to bring a report? Would we be able to bring a report for more car parks citywide, and wouldn't that be our first priority? Could you answer that,
Councillor,
please?
you're well outside the scope of the motion with that one, but we can
don't think so.
certainly answer the first part of your question if there were other options for deterring improper parking. So, if I can ask the officer, please, to explain the penalty units in dollar values for us in this, and then also with what other measures, as per Councillor Berridge's question, could be employed. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through the Chair. The current penalty value for one penalty unit is $154. Correct. To increase that to two penalty units, we'll double that, $308. In terms of options that are available to address Councillor's question, I think it's important to understand that we do educate the community in the first instance by installing no stopping signs, by installing yellow lines to educate the community on expectations, and they're primarily in safety related areas, whether it's obstruction, pedestrian safety and so forth. So to increase the penalty is about deterring behaviour, and currently we issue about 20% of our fines are for no stopping offences. So that's high, and we are seeking to reduce that. So there's certainly other educational mechanisms we can use, whether it's social media, communications, but ultimately it is around reducing that 20% down, because that is excessively high within the city.
I'm sorry, Councillor, you can't respond. You can ask a further question.
I hear that you say that education, and that's great. I think we are very educated. but we need to address the problem, and the problem is people wouldn't illegally park if there was adequate parking.
Councillor, that's not something this officer can answer.
So can we bring a report back? Can we bring a report back that shows where we need the parking
I'm sorry,
citywide?
you are not speaking to the item. If you would
Oh,
like
I'm
to
sorry,
bring
I
a
thought it
motion
was.
asking for a parking report, that is something that you could do in a future agenda, but it is not something that can be discussed here at this motion. Thank you.
Can I ask one more then?
Is it a relevant question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Further down, the community consultation, it talks about Dunwich and it says there were 32 submissions, but we've passed Dunwich now. Has there been consultation response for just the other car parks, not Dunwich, parking issues that are needed?
Are you asking if the raise in the fines citywide has been consulted?
It says here community consultation, that there were 32 submissions for Dunwich, but has there been for other parking areas across Redlands? I thought that was pretty simple. That's the question.
But I believe the councillor is not asking about the motion. She's not asking if we've consulted on the motion, because the change to the broader city is only the penalty units. Right. I think the councillor is asking, did we consult the rest of the city on their parking needs?
No, she's asking about the penalty unit.
Okay, councillors, I'll let the councillor speak for herself. Councillor, are you asking about the consultation across the city for the penalty units or consultation on parking?
I'll let it go because it's obviously going to be too hard. But I would like to ask one more thing then. If, as Councillor Mitchell said, it's ignorance and bad manners, could it be that people are left with no other choices? Could that also be the problem?
That's not a...
Oh, that's not for this officer.
That is not a question.
I'll have to bring a motion to discuss this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A question from Councillor Mackenzie.
The report says that the safety-related offences, particularly those related to parking and stopping violations, are a significant concern for both pedestrians and motorists. Was there any community consultation done to assert that there are those concerns by the community? Or is that just an assumption made by officers?
Thank you. If you could answer that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through the Chair. I think it's fair to say that no stopping signage or line marking are in areas where there's either obstruction or risk to safety, whether it be for pedestrians or motorists. So I think why people choose to park in those particular areas or stop in those particular areas, I can only go on the information that I've been received through appeals from residents and what have you. But I think it's critical to understand that these areas are in place to protect child safety and, pedestrians and motorists. So I really can't answer as to why people park in those particular areas.
I asked whether council officers had gone out to the community and done a consultation piece to present a report back to council to say the community is concerned about this. And this is why we need to increase the penalty fines, because there is a significant concern expressed by the community over these issues.
I think it's our due diligence to ensure that we enforce the regulations that are in place to support the community.
So no, there was no community
consultation. Okay, Councillor, we can't enter into debate with an officer. Thank you.
Not answering the question.
No, I'll ask you to withdraw that, Councillor.
I'll withdraw the statement. So has there been any... There has been an increase of offences or near-misses in these areas where safety has been compromised?
Councillor, I will ask you to address your questions through the chair, if you could, please.
Through you, Madam Chair. Has there been any data collated to assert that there has been an increase of incidences or near misses where safety has been compromised?
I assume this is the new button here. So through the chair, so the data comes from our infringements, and so as Donna has explained, there's a 20% amount of infringements which relate to these safety related offences. Good governance good local lawmaking is actually trying to deter that offence because they are safety related. And so for council, we have a range of tools which are available. One of those is through the local law, one of those is through the infringement process. So, as was stated earlier, deterrence is key, and getting a fine is a deterrent. And so one of the operational tools we have available is to do this. Any local law process that we embark on relies on that operational data. We don't necessarily consult purely on that data. When we go to recommendations, we consult on that. This report was purely about enhancing that deterrence through a higher infringement amount, and that's principally what the report's about.
Mum, phone is. Through you, Madam Chair. So the data is just that there's been an increase of offences, not actually safety has actually been compromised. Because I think a lot of these issues are around schools where there is grossly inadequate parking for school pick-up and drop-off time.
Okay, that's not actually a question, Councillor.
I can make a quick comment. So it's about behaviour, and so behaviour, whether it's right or wrong, we're trying to deter that. And if that means there's drivers to park differently or a different infrastructure that's provided at those schools, they're things which need to be addressed, but doesn't mean we don't try and deter it through this particular tool.
Okay, thank you very much. Officer Simpson. Councillor.
If that's an issue that needs to be addressed in the inadequate parking at schools, what is council then going to do to address those issues aside from
Councillor, that'll be a matter for a further discussion on another day, depending upon the outcome of these votes today. So if I can, I'll move on. Is that a question you'd like to ask, Councillor?
Madam Chair, if I could make an observation, please.
I'm not taking comments at the moment. Thank you.
It will rectify.
Do you have a question, Councillor Bishop?
The myth
that
is just stated, and I think it's impertinent.
Councillor, I'm not taking comments at the moment. If you could hold that, I appreciate it. Do you have a question, Councillor Bishop?
Yes, through you, Chair, to the officers. First of all, a comment and acknowledgement of the important work you do through compliance and upholding laws, local laws and traffic laws. It's not a simple role, but it's very important for our community that we have clarity and consistency. My question is, you've raised this obviously because it's a concern. Should this not be successful today, are there other pathways that we can pursue to increase the awareness and education without so much the pain element of a doubling of this fine, so that we can take the community on a journey, a shared journey, at a time of fiscal constraint for many people? It's a challenging and unsettling time. So is there another pathway that we can explore to help you and to help the community stay safe? That's my question. If this does not go ahead today, are there other educational pathways that we can pursue? There's another subsequent question I have after that.
Okay, I think that was somewhat answered in response to Councillor Berridge, but Officer Simpson or Officer Rasan, if you could.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just to assist, when you're looking at trying to ensure safety in the community and upholding community standards, that comes at a cost. So if the people who are breaking those laws are not the ones paying, then other members of the community have to pay for that increased compliance, that increased education, those other strategies that councillors are referring to. User pays is something that I think a lot of people are familiar with. We're not trying to gouge money out of people who can't afford it. What we're trying to do is have responsible citizens doing the right thing in the community, parking safely so our children aren't hurt or killed, and then having to deal with the fallout of what does happen if there's irresponsible behaviour occurring. So there are local laws that are in place so that we can have standards within the community that are fair and responsible and reasonable for all. If you break those laws, then you do need to deal with the consequences of that behaviour. if you are looking for other mechanisms of education, of compliance, that does cost. It doesn't come free, and you do need to pay for that in some way. So the question is, who do you want to pay for that? The whole community or those people who are breaking the laws? I hope that's of assistance for your decision-making, councillors.
You have a second question, councillor.
Yeah, and I want to thank the officer for that response, and I acknowledge that payment for this work is important. There are other ways that we can cover those costs, and I think that that's part of the overall culture of establishing what this motion is about. I'm sorry, I'm trying
to be fair to all of the participants in the meeting who I've asked someone else not to make a comment in order to allow you to ask a question. So it would not be fair of me to allow you then to make a comment. If you could ask your question, please.
Yeah. Is it possible that we could embark on a process of education first, identify areas where we may need to do somewhat of a blitz using the current options that we have with the current charge, and if that doesn't work, then consider returning to this as an approach at a later point.
I think all of that would be on the table. I'm sure the officers would simply say yes. Is that right?
Yeah, so confirming that, this is a citywide problem, so it's not specifically targeted for any particular area. Having said that, there's rotation as far as compliance, attendance at different schools or different hotspots from time to time.
Thank you. And Dr. Davis, if you'd like to just explain the traffic engineering around yellow lines as a deterrent, that would be great.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Madam Chair, I wouldn't like to even think about being the engineer in the room. However, the yellow lines are usually based on a risk assessment and standards, traffic standards. We can provide some more information. They're not based on community consultation. There are specific rules and regulations around parking within so many metres of a intersection or so many metres of a drop-off zone. So that's how we actually come up with the rules or the areas that actually have no standing, no stopping, and the yellow lines.
Right, thank you very much. Any further questions, councillor, on this motion 2 of the item 13.4? Yes, the question.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through yourself to our officers, and thank you, Officer Wilson. You mentioned, I'm just seeking clarity there, one penalty unit is $154. Is that the current penalty unit or what we're looking to go to? What will the increase be, please?
I know, councillor, it was going from 1 to 2 penalty units.
Yeah,
so
yes.
154 to 309.
So the penalty unit dollar value is not changing.
If this motion is not successful, the motion is asking, would you like to increase to 2 penalty units?
Yep.
So fines will go from $154 to around $309.
Yeah.
If the motion is successful,
yep,
they will increase. If the motion is not successful, they will not.
Thank you. Often we put in the reports a penalty unit. We don't put a dollar value on it because those dollar values change. And I'm just seeking clarity. So where the penalty unit for whatever reports you're reading are currently 154. This motion is to double, but the 154 will be the base rate. It's not changing.
So your question is who sets the dollar amount for the penalty unit, and how does that change?
And so, but that base rate will not change now for some time.
We don't know. I believe the state sets that, but I'll ask officers.
Yeah, I just think it's important. I don't want to be supporting or not supporting the penalty unit, which is the baseline, and then to go through this conversation, and then in 3 weeks, for an example, or next month, that base rate changes. Thanks.
Could you just clarify that, please, Officer Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through the Chair. And thank you for the question, Councillor. So every year, the Department of Justice sets the penalty value. So it's typically every financial year. So currently, this is the 23-24 amount is $154. and that is likely potentially to increase next financial year. But it's not set by council; it is set by the Queensland Government. Thank you.
Thank you. I really needed that
Thank you.
extra clarity.
Councillors, Councillor Hewlett, have you got a question?
I just want to put the motion because we've had enough discussion on this motion.
Well, just in the interest of fairness, I'd like to allow Councillor Gollay to make his comment. Unless you, I will. If you would like to put the motion, then you know, there's a formal process around that, and I will accept that. Sorry.
I want to put the motion.
Okay. Councillors, we have a request to put the motion, so we have to take a vote on whether we put the motion immediately. I don't need a seconder for that, do I? No. Okay, so councillors, those in favour of putting the motion immediately, I was only going to allow one more speaker anyway, in favour of putting the motion immediately. It's a division. Those in favour are Councillor Hewlett, Councillor Edwards and Councillor Berridge. Those against are Councillor Boglari, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Gollay, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Bishop, Councillor Talty, and not present is Councillor Williams. So with that, I just would like to have a little indulgence just to allow Councillor Gollay, in fairness, to say what he wanted to say.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, councillors, I wanted to just cover off on a few things here. So if I look at my own division, about 2 weeks ago I had a street meeting with about 50 residents. Their primary concern around that particular school is not so much what council isn't doing, it's what the drivers are doing. And so when we have a large school through under a ministerial direction continues to expand, I've personally been out to this school with the state member Kim Richards. We have had representatives from the Department of Transport in place. We've had council officers in place. Redland City Council has worked very closely with this particular school and DTMR. One, to expand the street and widen the street and to provide more parking. Two, through the planning process, council allowed for the demolition of a building to increase parking on the school site. That basically allowed for 2 kiss and rides where parents are meant to come through the school, drop and go. It's not time to turn up an hour early and have a chin wag in the car park with your mate. But still, what's happening is irrespective of...
Councillor, can you just tie this to the motion?
It is.
Okay.
Irrespective of penalties, and despite all the work done between council officers, my office, Kim Richards' office, Department of Transport, and the school, and the residents' indulgence, there is still elements of the Road Traffic Act being broken, where students, for example, believing it is their entitlement to drive, refuse to park on the school grounds because they have to hand their keys in to the admin office, which creates accountability. They park on the street.
Councillor,
park on the street.
Councillor, if I can, we are well off the motion.
Parents then...
Councillor, please.
Parents are then being booked
Councillor,
because they can't park.
I think your comment is that no matter how much work you do with a school, there will always be elements of people who will break the rules.
There is a large proportion of people who will break the rules purely on their need just to get in and out. I don't think increasing these penalty rates or penalty units is the answer, because there's already fines in place now that are being broken.
You're in effect speaking against the item, and we have moved on from that. So I'll ask you to leave it there if that's all right. But thank you for working with your school. Councillor Bishop, did you have a comment you needed to make?
No, there's a lot I'd like to say, but we'll go with that.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I will put the vote. Those in favour. Now, just to be very clear, sorry? Oh, apologies. Councillor Mitchell, would you like to wrap up. I did a third time.
Yes, I would, and thank you, Councillor Berridge, for your support. Yeah, I think after that debate, I really am very motivated to speak now. Actually, I think more needs to be done. We've heard that, and thank you, Councillor Golley, for that. More needs to be done. More needs to be done in infrastructure. We've heard. More needs to be done by way of education. We've heard that, and more needs to be done, perhaps with penalties as part of that process. So, thank you, Councillor Hughes, and that's exactly right. Everyone, this is about safety, and this is about what message does this group of councillors want to send to the community. That's what this is about. So I note the financial impact when people get a fine. That's the point. It hurts.
Point of order.
Pardon me, Councillor. What is your point of order, Councillor?
I'm pretty sure that we are not allowed to repeat what we've already gone
Councillor,
over in our summing
Councillor, if I may, that is not a point of order. The councillor is summing up and he is not adding to the debate. He is summarising the debate. So your point of order is not sustained.
That he's allowed to repeat himself often.
Thank you.
Is that correct?
Councillor, turn your mic off, please. I'm giving the floor back to Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and we'll continue to summarise, as is the purpose of the summary. Financial penalties hurt, and that's exactly the point, and we've heard that around the room, and I respect the comments of councillors that say in some of our socio-economic elements in our community, that's going to hurt more than others. I'm sorry about that, but we can't solve that here today. We're talking about what the appropriate level of penalty is, and I think they are inadequate. And that's reflected in the conversation today where everyone has said more needs to be done. Everyone has said more that needs to be done. The data, we've talked about that. Well, have a look in emergency departments. And councillors, as chair of the Active Travel Safety Reference Group, our corporate plan also reflects these sort of safety elements that we're talking about for our pedestrian-friendly city. $309 will be an absolute bargain versus you having to front up to the coroner's court, versus your insurance costs, versus the compensation that you have to pay a victim. We are talking the consequences of safety infringements. So it's not about, oh, wow, I've been a little bit frustrated today. You will not know, or your friend, your neighbour, your daughter, your son will not know that they've created an enormous consequence of this safety behaviour until it's too late. $309 is a bargain to save a life, to stop a hip. You're talking about your hip pocket, I'm talking about hip fractures. Okay, so councillors, all the things we've talked about, all the impacts financially and others around our city, that's exactly the point. It's if we're giving a tap on the wrist or we're giving something meaningful to reflect the importance of the safety consequences. So what's the message you want to send to your community today, would be what I would say front of your mind. Is your hip pocket and your inconvenience more important than the safety of those people? Because that is really what we're talking about today. So with that, appreciate the debate, thank you, but I hope you see the higher purpose of these infringements and vote for the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. With that, I put the motion. Now, councillors, just to remind you, voting for the motion increases the penalty units. Voting against the motion maintains the penalty units at the current rate. Thank you. With that, I put the motion. Those in favour? That's a division. Those in favour are Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Hughes. Those against? Councillor Bulgari, Councillor Golley, Councillor Hewlett, Councillor Edwards, Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Berridge, Councillor Bishop, Councillor Talty, and Councillor Williams is absent today. Thank you, councillors. Now, as a matter of consequence of motion 2 being defeated, we will now go to motion 3.B. 3.B is more or less back-of-house housekeeping that allows the officers to take from the report what they need in order to keep the penalty units the same in a change to the local law, because we split the motion between the parking at Stratty and the penalty units. So I'll just get a mover, and moved Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Councillor Boglari. Are you speaking?
I have
You have a question?
about clarification of just what this part of the motion is covering. Just because we've split what was one motion into three, and if we could just get officers to give us an overview.
I will do that,
Thank you.
Councillor. Thank you. Sorry? It's on the next page. No, that's 3B. So if I will have Councillor Mackenzie speak to the motion, but just to clarify, originally the officers brought us one motion which captured two matters to do with the local law. Because we asked to split that into two votes, they need this third vote simply to allow the changes required in the report or post-report in order to allow the parking changes at Stradbroke to go through as per motion 1 and allow the penalty units to remain the same as per motion 2. I will see if the officers have anything that they can add to that to clarify for Councillor Bishop.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak to this. So, as councillors, as the Deputy Mayor pointed out, you voted for the changes for parking at Dunnet Cemetery in motion 1, and then you voted down the increased penalty units in motion 2. So what 3B is asking you to do is there's an amended local law that's been provided this morning, which just reflects the parking change for Dunnet Cemetery and has the penalty units exactly as they were in the current enforced version. So what 3B is asking you to do is a resolve to make the amendments to the local law, which just will reflect the change for parking at Dunnet Cemetery and nothing else.
So in my shorthand, it's a summary of what we've already done. But Councillor Mackenzie, do you want to add to that at all?
No, thank you.
You were moving the motion, weren't you?
I was moving it and enough debate's been had. I don't think we need to discuss it any further.
Okay. I am required to ask, are there any speakers against? I'm relieved to say there are not, so I'm going to put the motion. Those in favour? That is a division. Oh, it's not a division? Okay, that is unanimous with Councillor Williams not present. Right. Next, councillors, we move on to items in the agenda at 14, advocacy and major projects, economic development. And we have for noting the Redlands Coast 2032 Legacy Working Group meeting summary. Can I have a mover and a seconder for 14.1? Moved Councillor Boglari, seconded Councillor Bishop. Councillor Boglari, would you like to speak to the item?
Oh, thank you. The report concerns a legacy group that was set up by council. It's all in the report on January 22 because it's a condition of the, now I've lost my place. It's on page 1 that it's a condition of the International Olympic Committee that is a host city that we actually develop a legacy plan. So we've set up this legacy group, and when you look at them on page 1 and 2, there's quite a lot of skilled locals there, not just in a particular sport or in disability, but also life skills. So we do get quite a good variety of opinions and feedback from them. And this is a report to council because they're not a decision-making group. In the terms of reference, it states the intent of such a group, and it is to provide a forum for discussion, it's to advocate, but it's also to make sure that the community views and aspirations are represented and reflected in any development of a Redlands Coast legacy plan that we have. So I do agree with having this group, considering the amount of knowledge that is amongst them. My only concern, and I would just like the officers to perhaps answer this through the chair, is though while I support it, I just want to ask the officers, how will the greater community's feedback also be collaborated by councillors while we're making this legacy plan?
If you could, Chris, and If you would also include just a very brief explanation of legacy, that we're not talking about particular facilities, but the legacy of the Olympics post 2032.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Councillor, for your question. If I maybe deal with the legacy part first. So the legacy is well defined by the International Olympic Committee, and happy to share some of those documents so the community can find those on the Olympic IOC website around what they define as legacy, particularly in this, Brisbane being the first one, as we'd call the new norm, where legacy is first. And so legacy is a very broad term, and deliberately so. So that could be for us, they're bringing forward a public transport infrastructure, which is certainly something the council is advocating for. A key thing of having an Olympic venue would be the impetus to bring public transport. So that would be a significant legacy for our city. It could be a range of other investment in other sporting infrastructure that would allow teams to come in and train in our city in advance of the games, or even probably perhaps more pertinently just investment in a range of infrastructure for our youth to then potentially train and become athletes, whether that is at 2032 or more broadly. Legacy is ultimately looking at how cities have captured the opportunity the Olympics brings with billions of people in the eyes upon the city. So that would probably be in tourism, the economy, and a range of different things. So that is what a legacy plan covers. The state government has released a draft of their Olympic legacy plan. That has been out for public comment, and anyone who was interested, I'd encourage you to have a look at that to see the scope of issues covered by that plan. Our council is looking to do a similar but obviously more localised version of that for our city. And that is what we're looking to cover off now. So the last question there, so Councillor, if you could repeat your first question to me.
Look, thank you for giving the definition of legacy. It is as I understood. You also mentioned things like tourism and our youth. I would like to know, I am not decreasing in any way the value of the people on the legacy group's feedback, because they're very, very skilled and knowledgeable people, but I would also like to know how the greater community is also going to be included in here. It does mention that these members will be advocating on behalf of council. I'm wondering, are they going to go out and also gather information and then bring it back to councillors? Because I understand this is where the decision-making body is. But while I support this group totally, I also just need to have some sort of reassurance that the greater community will also be able to have some sort of feedback.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for clarifying that for me and through you, Deputy Mayor. At this stage, it is an advisory group. They are bringing information and perspectives through to officers. Officers are gathering and compiling that. Our intention is to bring that back to this forum for a future decision of council to ultimately adopt a legacy plan or strategy or framework or whatever terminology we ultimately put to it. It's not currently council officers' position that we would be then putting that out for community feedback and input. We believe that there's enough representation from that group, and then indeed from yourselves around the table, to adequately represent the views of the community. But if that's something that you wish to do, then ultimately you can guide us to put that out to consultation once that plan is in a format that we can do so. But that's not currently our intention.
Okay, I mean, it's separate to this anyway. I just wanted to understand completely the role of this while I support it. But then also that separate way of gathering information. Councillors are quite capable of going out and talking and bringing it back as well. I agree.
Okay, that was a speaker for. Do I have a speaker against the motion? A question from Councillor Bishop through the chair.
Yes, thank you.
Would you just one moment? Sorry, Tracy, were you a speaker? Oh. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely agree and acknowledge the significance of the personnel involved in this group, and very grateful to have them supporting what I think are going to be very important legacy requirements for the city. My question, and acknowledging what Officer Isles has said a moment ago about the cross-checking mechanism of the panel themselves and ourselves as councillors. When I look at page 195 or 6 of 9 from this report, down the bottom, understanding the community and supporting community, the second dot point says the game's creating a sense of urgency for development and decision making. That just gives me a little bit of concern about decision making done under an urgency, and I just want to make sure that the things that are going to come back that are discussed, how we can just make sure we've got line of sight, because there are questions that community are asking about making sure that we are making robust decisions, and that sits with us as councillors and also this panel, but also with officers. The question is,
Clarify your question, yeah, please.
when the information comes back to us, will that come with suggestions for us to adopt as recommendations? And what's the expectation on behalf of this working group framework that those things need to be upheld?
So thank you, Councillor. It is truly just a reference group, so I don't think they have any expectations whatsoever that whatever they put up will ultimately be upheld. Ideally it would, because I think they represent the views of the community. But ultimately we'll be putting up a framework. We have yet to determine exactly what that will look like, whether that will have aspirational statements or whether it will be a detailed list with very specific items and actions, and indeed whether they're all for council to execute or they're just broadly things that the community can seize upon themselves and see the opportunity for them as business or the community seize upon. So it'll probably cover all of those things. We don't have a firm view of exactly yet of what it will cover. In terms of that question around the urgency, it was actually put to them in I guess as a hypothetical scenario, is that the reality is the Olympics is creating a degree of urgency in that there is a timeline. We have a clock running. We're now down to less than 10 years to do that, and whether that requires some fast decision making on a range of topics, whatever those may be. The question was put to them: if it created, I guess, that burning platform, what might you suggest are the key things that the organisation or the city needs to look at as a matter of urgency? So they're all just questions and hypotheticals at this stage rather than anything else. But thank you for the question.
Is it possible for councillors to sit in and observe any of the discussions?
Well, I don't know that you need to ask that question, Councillor.
I'm just using this moment to ask that question, if that's okay.
Well, that's probably something to take offline. It's not directly relevant to...
Well, is it outside the terms and conditions?
I believe so.
You do? Can I ask officers if it is?
Because the auspices of how the legacy working group meetings are run is not being discussed here. We're noting a report of what they have been discussing. This is just a report.
Are you suggesting that I'm not allowed to ask that question?
I'm suggesting that the forum to ask this question is not in the general meeting right now. It's certainly open to you to ask that question.
This is a moment.
I believe it was asked yesterday as well.
Well, forgive me. Question to you is, this is the first time that we've had information brought to us, which is tremendous to see. I see that there is a number of discussions that have taken place. A third meeting took place on the 3rd of August. It would be nice to know if councillors can attend.
Well, Councillor, write to the CEO and ask.
I'm just asking if it...
Okay, I'm moving on. Thank you. Councillor Hughes, you had a question?
Thank you. I'll just get the page up. My apologies. I flipped the page.
Sorry, can I
on page
order? A councillor is allowed to ask a question for clarification on any matter, and I believe councillor
related to the motion,
related to the item, and that question was related.
And I have
to
ruled, councillor, that is not related to the matter.
And I note that that's what you've ruled.
So, thank you, councillor Hughes.
And I move a, what's the wording, please?
Dissent in the chair.
Dissent in the chair, because I firmly believe that was a question relating to the matter. So I move a dissent in the chair.
Thank you, councillor. Do I need a second for that? Okay. You want to get advice from the General Counsel?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, as Chair, I'll just refer that question to our General Counsel or Corporate Governance Manager, please.
It's a you don't need a second. Sorry. So it's a procedural motion, Madam Chair.
So it's a procedural motion, councillors. So with that, we have a motion of dissent in the chair in relation to my ruling that the question should have been asked outside of this forum, and it was yesterday. Those in favour of the dissent in the chair? We have a division. Councillor Boglari, Councillor Hewlett, Councillor Berridge, Councillor Bishop for the motion. Against? Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Golay, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Talty and Councillor Williams is not present. Sorry? I'm not sure either. They can record it later. I don't vote? Okay, leave me out of it. Thank you. Now, with that, we can return to Councillor Hughes' question.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. On page 192 of the report, there's a heading titled Next Steps, and the third Legacy Working Group is scheduled to meet on the 3rd of August, obviously had, and then a report detailing outcomes of the third meeting will be presented at the September Council General Meeting. And my question is, do we need to be having these monthly updates because they are for noting? And obviously, I'm not sure how often this group will meet, probably more to start with, and then it will taper off. But so my question through you to the officers is, do we need to have these updates brought back to us? Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Isles. If you could just explain the reason that the report's been brought for noting and how that might be dealt with in the future.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hughes. When Council decided to create the Legacy Group, it included endorsement of a requirement for the CEO to create terms of reference for that working group. Those terms of reference were then created. The terms of reference currently state that a report will be brought to Council of the minutes of the outcomes of those meetings. So at this stage, that is the terms of reference. We as officers have inferred that as we ordinarily would in this forum, as a report to Council being to this forum and in this group. If that is something that you don't want to do, I'm very happy to take that online. I believe the CEO has delegation to make minor administrative changes to the terms of reference. If that is in line with being then a minor change, I'm very happy to talk to the CEO about adjusting that terms of reference so that we don't have to bring it back. We can perhaps provide it for in a different forum. So, but ultimately that'll be a decision for the CEO to make, whether we want to adjust the terms of reference.
Thank you. I had some questions on this side.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, officers.
Thank you. Councillor Golay.
Thank you. Can I just seek clarity from officers? And I apologise, some of you may not have been here at the time. Our original plans to move forward in the proposal of taking part in some type of Olympic whatever was so that we could actually get an upfront report on things like public transport requirement and infrastructure requirements. So can we confirm that that was the case? I'm quite certain we actually moved a motion at the time to take part and get involved in the proposal of an Olympics based on getting a solid report on public transport. And I'm afraid
this is a little bit about some other matter. Or no, asking about
so this? If we look here, we're talking about sustainability experts in transport, and that's what this Legacy Group is doing now. But I would have expected that we would have already had a report on the requirements of the public transport required to service what is going to be a fairly major event before we started investing down the rabbit hole, putting land aside and all these different things that we're talking about.
I think you're getting
get a bit of an understanding.
Councillor, if you could not speak over the top of the chair, please. You're getting very broad there. We are noting a report from a body of volunteers. I think that what you're asking is outside of this report, but I will ask Officer Isles to simply explain that the broader discussion about public infrastructure and funding is quite separate to the report that is in front of us.
Well, just on that point then, Madam Chair, we're asking about a Legacy Group that's supposed to be supplying expert advice. I would have thought before we went down the rabbit hole,
it's not expert advice. It's community. It's community views.
Community views. Okay. I'd really like to know where that transport study went that we originally voted on, which would actually highlight whether we can or cannot
that is a matter,
service
Councillor, that is a matter you
an
can
Olympic
raise.
site.
You can raise that as it's your right, but it's not relevant to this motion right in front of us right now.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I thought it was because it says here we're talking to transport experts. I thought it would have been done. Thank you.
Councillor,
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
can you expand in any way, or have you got anything to contribute that might clarify
Look, probably all I would add is that in a broader lens of legacy across the whole city rather than the specific view of the venue, the Olympic venue, which we have for the duration of the Olympics, but the broader legacy perspective, we're certainly looking at public transport investment across the city. We're doing that, and beyond that legacy forum through myself and Louise and her team, where Council has jointly funded with Brisbane City Council, the state government, a project to explore the fast tracking of the extension of the busway out to Capalaba to be part of that hub and spoke of a long-term public transport investment. So I would say that there's a range of processes underway, both from that legacy group to look at, again, what are the legacy outcomes that might apply to the city from a broader transport perspective, but they are looking at, and as necessarily so, the entire city, and almost to the exclusion of, we're not contemplating what may happen at our Olympic venue site there at Birkdale. That's actually not the subject of the group at all. We're looking at the whole of the city lens and taking a view of everything almost but the Olympic period of time, because we're actually looking at the 10 years before and then 10 years after games. We're looking at a 20-year horizon, as we would kind of call it. Thank you.
Just one more question then on that. Is anyone from the state government actually looking at that and going, well, we're prepared to throw dollars towards this legacy outcome? Look, it's fine to have volunteers to say, hey, and this is what we need.
Councillor, again,
where are the dollars coming from?
Councillor, you're asking a question about the broader issue of state government and funding and legacy of major infrastructure projects, which is an ongoing piece of work and is not related to this group.
Okay, thank you. I just don't want to leave a legacy of debt. I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's fair enough, but it is not relevant to the noting of this report right now. Councillor Mitchell, did you have a question?
Yes, just teasing out on the mass transport study. My understanding is, just seeking clarification, that was through the South East Queensland Council of Mayors. I believe that a number of councils contributed, and that information is still relevant. I'm sure, I guess, SEQ mayors are advocating strongly, as we do as well. But am I correct that that was the mass people study back in 2017, I believe?
Which was a catalyst for other decisions, but is not, again, relevant to this report. Chris, can you just clarify the relevance of the mass transport study to this report, if there is any?
Look, I might take some of that on notice, because some of it does predate me and I wasn't involved in that specific study. But probably what I would say is that work continues on. The state government is part of the current project, to guess the Councillor Gole's question. Jointly, both TMR and Department of State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government, Public, and all those kind of groups are all involved in it. In terms of Department of Transport main roads, they are part of the detailed planning, and they will form a public transport strategy for the Olympics, which is beyond us. It's actually not our job to do that. It's the state's job to do that. But I would note that for those who have had the time or interested to read it, the draft regional plan, which has been released, has a specific action in the infrastructure supplement, which talks about the extension of the Eastern Busway. So there is definite state commitment, and therefore I would assume funds, because they put it in their document, to talk about the extension of this investment into our city. So I think there's definitely intent on the part of the state to recognise the need for public transport investment in the city.
Thank you. Councillors, I'm trying to give a great deal of latitude here and allow questions, but the questions are getting very broad and off topic, and so I'm going to continue to offer an opportunity to ask questions, but please keep to the item in front of us. Councillor Berridge, you have a question.
Yes, I'll be very quick. Through the chair, please, to Chris Isles. The working group meetings, can councillors attend these meetings, please?
Councillor, that is a repeat of the question that Councillor Bishop asked, and I've already ruled on that.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure what his question was. I just heard that he wasn't allowed to ask it. My apologies. So, is that not part of is that not a relevant question?
Councillor, Would you turn your mic off, please, unless you have another question? Councillor Bishop, you've already had an opportunity to ask questions, so what is it you're requesting?
I was given an opportunity to ask a question, which was
A number of
proposed. It was that I asked yesterday. When is the appropriate forum? I thought it would be now. If there was a question yesterday, was it answered yesterday? I don't believe it was. But the question does still stand from my part.
Councillor, I did ask you to take it outside of the chamber because it wasn't relevant.
Yes,
we did have
this is the
a note
forum
of
for
dissension
debate.
in
Forgive
the
me.
chair, and the majority of your fellow councillors agreed with the decision of the chair. So unless you have a new question, I'll be moving on.
I do have a new question, and I'll note that that question still stands, and it stood yesterday, and that seemed to be the appropriate forum, but in the interest of the local government principles, transparent and effective processes and decision-making in the public interest, another councillor has suggested that it might be preferable that these terms of reference notes don't come back to us in future. Is that going to be part of what we're going to carry forward? Because if that's the case, I think that's a change from...
Made
so
on
are you
that.
debating me?
You are well aware that there was no decision.
Are you debating me?
No, I am not, councillor. I'm suggesting...
I'm asking a question.
Okay, what is your question succinctly?
Councillor Hughes suggested that these terms of reference notes don't need to come back to us, and that might get taken to the CEO, and they might not come back to us.
Councillor Hughes asked a question as to why they were brought and was it necessary they be brought.
Are you debating me? You asked me to give you
I am
a question.
not.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
I'm telling you, councillor, that your question does not stand.
So the question...
Point of order.
Yes, councillor Edwards. What is your point of order?
I want put motion.
Thank you. Okay, we have a put motion. Councillors, for those who would like the motion in front of us put to an immediate vote without further discussion or questions, those in favour? We have a division. The councillors in support of the put motion are Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Golay, Councillor Hewlett, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Telty. Those against, Councillor Boglari, Councillor Hughes, did you vote twice? No, sorry. Councillor Hughes, Councillor Berridge and Councillor Bishop, with Councillor Williams absent from the room. That is carried. Therefore, we will now put the vote for the matter in front of us, which is 14.1. Those in favour? Councillor Boglari, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Golay, Councillor Edwards. Sorry? Oh, sorry, Councillor Golay, you are for or against? Sorry, I couldn't see you. Councillor Boglari, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Hewlett, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Hughes. This is the for vote. Councillor Telty and Councillor Williams is absent. Those against the motion? Yes or no? Councillor Boglari, you against? Sorry. Oh, sorry. It's been a lot. Those against are Councillor Golay, Councillor... Yes. Councillor Berridge and Councillor Bishop. Thank you. Councillors, moving on to 15.1, which is related to the new lease on the Russell Island Community Arts Incorporated. Councillor Edwards has a motion. Is it the motion or a motion to defer? The motion. Okay, so Councillor Edwards is putting the motion as proposed, seconded by Councillor Hewlett. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Edwards?
Yes, thank you, I would. I'd just like to paint a picture first. This is a arts organisation on Russell Island which has over 150 members. It's been going for about 20 years. When we acquired Kennedy Farm, probably about 14 years ago, we turned it into a sporting complex, but the farmhouse itself, which is over the side, we allowed it for Rickards to use that building. They have ever since, and it's used for a number of artistic uses and pottery and things like that, and the group continues to thrive there. I did have some concerns when I saw this because they said to me that I should probably point out I'm the patron of them too, so they did say to me that they don't believe they've got enough area there and they'd like to increase the lease. But having listened to officers, they've spoken to them, they think they can operate within the needs within the the proposed area. A 5-year tenure lease has been proposed as opposed to 10 years, and from what I understand is the concern about it is that whole farm precinct was for sporting use, and it seems that perhaps the artistic side, but even though it's not impinging on the rest of the area there, might be suited to another location. And so I'm welcome the fact that in the report that the office are going to work closely with Regards over the next 5 years during that term of the shorter lease to determine whether there's an alternative location which is actually better all round, and hopefully it's better for Rickard's. And I note that the Maclay Arts Group, they've got on council land, they've recently got a substantial amount of funding from the state government, I think $1 million, to build a complex there. And I hope that this could lead to something like that. So I think it's okay. I'm going to support the shorter 5-year lease, and hopefully that during that period it'll become crystallised whether they should stay where they are, then perhaps an increased footprint, or perhaps there's somewhere else they can be relocated to, which is better for them, council, and the community.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Do we have any speakers against? Do you need to wrap up, Councillor Edwards? No. With that, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously with Councillor Williams not present. 15.2 is the Redlands Lawn Tennis Association Incorporated. I have a mover for 15.2, please. Moved Councillor Mitchell, seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Mitchell?
Just very briefly, just to note that we're looking at a renewal of a 10-year lease. The Lawn Tennis Club's been at that site since 1970, but in operation since 1936. So they're locals for sure and certain. Currently around 500 playing members. So appreciate the officers have done all the due diligence in working with the club to bring this lease to us. And just looking into the future, the importance of the precinct within that club footprint sits around the showgrounds with the future opportunities. I'm sure that'll all be integrated as we go forward. But pleased to support this 10-year lease for a terrific local club.
Thank you. To the state's actions to have stronger dog laws for safer communities. Have a move for 15.3, that's moved Councillor Hughes, seconded Councillor Gollay. Councillor Hughes, would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Delighted to move item 15.3. This is the state government discussion paper on strong dog laws and safer communities. In speaking for and in support of the report, I'd just like to note the officers' work that's gone into this. And I've mentioned previously in a general meeting that Redland City Council has had a representative from our council on this board. We here in Redland City know the importance and understand the importance of our current legislation that is quite outdated, and truly this opportunity to speak to it from our officers has been valued, and the effort they've gone into is great. I really support it, and thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a speaker against? Is there any questions related to the matter? Oh, Councillor Hughes, you have a question?
In speaking to the report, I'd like to ask if an officer could be made available, thank you, to specifically speak to the attachments and council's response to the report. Thank you.
Okay, I believe Officer Wilson will do that for you.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to present this report to you today. The purpose of this report is to seek council endorsement of comments prepared by officers in response to the recently released discussion paper by the state titled Strong Dog Laws, Safer Communities. This discussion paper comes from a review of the Animal Management Act, which was triggered by a number of serious dog attacks across the state a few years ago. It is acknowledged that dogs play an important role in Queensland families, providing companionship and improving health and wellbeing. It is also acknowledged that most dog owners do the right thing and meet their responsibilities. However, there continues to be reports of dog attacks across our city and the state. The discussion paper seeks to consult on 7 areas of opportunity designed to strengthen the existing requirements and reinforce responsible dog ownership. The state government is consulting on the following areas: developing and implementing a comprehensive statewide community education campaign. Council acknowledges and supports this initiative. In addition, we will be advocating for messaging to incorporate the importance of desexing of dogs, as well as dog obedience training. The state's seeking consultation on imposing new statewide bans on restricted dog breeds. Again, Council supports this initiative, noting that breeds of dogs have been prohibited within our city over the past 20 plus years. The state's consulting on statewide requirement for dogs to be effectively controlled. Again, Council supports this initiative. Council currently has an existing requirement within its local law requiring that all dogs to be on lead in public places unless being exercised in designated dog off-leash areas. Excuse me. This will ensure a consistency across the state. The state's consulting on reviewing penalties for owners of dogs that cause harm. Again, this initiative is supported. Reviewing the maximum penalties that apply for offences relating to dogs would ensure the seriousness of these offences are reinforced and will ensure the highest penalties apply to the most serious of offences. The state's consulting on introduction of a new offence that includes imprisonment as a maximum penalty for the most serious of dog attacks. Again, this initiative is supported. The state government is proposing to introduce a new criminal offence in the Act that captures conduct of an owner or a responsible person for a dog who fails to take reasonable steps to effectively control their dog if the dog causes serious injuries or death to a person. The new offence would also include a sliding scale of penalties, which does include imprisonment. And the state's consulting on providing clarity under the Act as to when a destruction order must be made for a regulated dog. Again, this initiative is supported. The state government is seeking to provide clarity as to when a destruction order must be made for a regulated dog. In addition, Council is requesting that the state consider introducing a status of probationary ownership and even consider disqualifying a person from owning a dog. And there will be a number of criteria elements to consider in that. Finally, the state is seeking to streamline the external review process for regulated dogs to minimise unnecessary delays experienced by councils and relevant parties. Again, this initiative is supported. The state government is proposing to limit when an external review decision about a destruction order can be appealed, which will assist in improving the turnaround of decisions through the Queensland Civil Administration Tribunal. And I think it's important to note that Council recently held a dog in our care for over 2 years as we worked through this both internal and external review periods. So there's some opportunities certainly in that space. Overall, Council officers support the proposed areas of improvement, but also offer a further range of comments for the state government's consideration. Firstly, we would be advocating for a full review of the Act and not just limiting the review to regulated dogs. And this will ensure that it meets both current and emerging needs, as well as community expectation. We would be seeking that registration of regulated dogs be made a condition of a regulated dog approval. We're also seeking clarity around dog attack decision makings, and that's to provide consistency in the outcomes of dog attacks across the state. We would also be seeking regulated dog enclosures to be reviewed to provide clarity around small lot dwellings and units. Also seeking the state to consider what local governments do with offspring of seized regulated dogs, i.e. if we have an impounded animal, a regulated dog, and it has a litter whilst in council's care, what's the process moving forward in that space? Administratively, just seeking the state to consider reviewing the regulated dog register, which is a statewide database of regulated dogs, and consider powers of entry provisions for regulated dogs just to provide greater powers for local government officers. And finally, but importantly, is the cost of keeping seized animals. Bearing in mind we've held a dog in our care for over 2 years, and that comes at considerable cost to the city. In closing, the proposed amendments in the discussion paper reflect a commitment to ensuring our community is safe and holding irresponsible dog owners accountable for their actions and that of their dogs. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Wilson. Councillors, I've had a request for comments. I will allow some comments, but can we make it relevant and short, please? Councillor Boglari, you wanted to make a comment?
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to commend the officers because this is such an emotional and distressing concern that every councillor in this room has probably had. But I was particularly impressed yet again by the work they did because you picked up the gaps that the state government had. And I was amazed at that there were 7 amendments that are on page, I've got 43 of 83. There were 7 amendments the officers picked up were a gap in the discussion paper. And when I read those amendments, they were really important, such as being able to get onto a site to check that they are being controlled correctly and, aspects like that. And I just wanted to publicly say thank you for making it even stronger and safer for the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is it a comment, Councillor? Okay.
Just endorsing what Councillor Boglari has said, but also noting that over the many years, the work that officers have been integrating has already been at best practice and leading where the state is moving to. So congratulations on the work that you've been doing for many years, and I think that that's instructive and valuable. So I hope they listen to your contributions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, Councillor Hughes, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would indeed, echoing my colleagues and again reiterating the importance of this issue and the state government, thankfully after many, many years and much pressure to have this review. Councillor Boglari has just rightly highlighted the attachment. It's the attachment to the report. So the report in our agenda is item 15.3. The attachment 2 starts on page 235, but where we've drilled down to is page 241 for those reading the agenda, and that is the additional considerations that Officer Wilson has just mentioned to us in detail. So for those in the community, this is a heartfelt issue. Just drill down to those pages if it's all too much and have a look at what we are putting back to the state government on your behalf. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. And with that, I put the motion. Those in favour? That is unanimous with Councillor Williams out of the room. Councillors, we're moving on to 15.4. I believe we have a deferment motion. Councillor Boglari?
I believe the staff have got the deferment motion just to defer this report until the next September council meeting, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I get a second? Okay. Sorry. Move Councillor Boglari, second to Councillor Bishop. I don't think we need any debate on that. Okay, councillors, with that, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That is unanimous with Councillor Williams out of the room. Thank you, councillors. We don't have any reports at 16. I'm not aware of any motions to repeal or amend a motion. I have no notice of motions at 18, and I understand Councillor Berridge has withdrawn her desire to move at 19. I don't believe so, but I'll ask councillors. Councillors, can I have a bit of a well, I can take the motion if you like, but do you wish to go into confidential, or are you happy to move on to voting? We're just switching. If we can just have a second to switch. Yes, absolutely. Councillors, if you want to go into your confidential agenda and have a quick update. Not even finding mine. There it is. Oh, ladies, we're probably not going into confidential, so okay. Thank you. Okay. Well, I will. Yes, Councillor Hughes. Councillors, okay. Well, councillors, what I might do is I will put the motion to move into confidential, and if you don't feel we need to move into confidential, vote no, and then we'll just move on. That's the cleanest way to do it. Yes. So if I can have a mover and a seconder to move into confidential, or it can fail for lack of a. Okay, moved Councillor Baglari, seconded Councillor Mitchell. All those in favour? That is, you want to move into confidential? Oh no, sorry. Okay, that is lost, so we won't be moving into confidential. Thank you. That's unanimous with Councillor Williams out of the room. So therefore, we're moving on now to just take the votes for the confidential items. So 20.1 is the lease for Cleveland Library Meeting Room. Can I have a mover and a seconder for 20.1, please? Councillor Baglari is moving it. Councillor Bishop is seconding it. All those in favour? That's unanimous with Councillor Williams out of the room. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for 20.2, the sponsorship program out of round application? Moved Councillor Mitchell, seconded Councillor Edwards. All those in favour? There's a division. That is all those in favour. Councillor Baglari, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Golle, Councillor Hewlett, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Berridge, Councillor Bishop, Councillor Talty. Those against are Councillor Hughes, and Councillor Williams is out of the room. Thank you, councillors. 20.3, if I can have a mover and a seconder, please, for the contracting plan for mowing and vegetation. Moved Councillor Edwards, seconded Councillor Hughes. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Yes, that's unanimous with Councillor Williams out of the room. We don't have to move back into open session, and I believe that's our closure. So with that, I thank you, councillors. Well done. We're 2 minutes to 12. And, oh, sorry, Yes, councillors, yep, that's fine. Okay, so with that, I will close the meeting at 11:58. Thank you. And councillors, if